I always get a thrill talking to people whose work has influenced my film journey. So I really, really am chuffed to be talking to you.
Yeah, cool.
So my questions are going to bounce back and forth a little bit. So just apologies for that. Bear with me. But I'm going to start with Blood because that's sort of the most recent one that is
Yep.
out. I found this film to be completely potent, like I really did, and it felt kind of raw, almost like a return to some of your earlier films. And
Yeah.
firstly, I want to thank you for putting kids in peril. I love it when filmmakers actually put kids in danger and actually sometimes even severely injure them because I feel like they're the kind of filmmakers you can't trust. They're the ones that they're able to string you along and you don't know where they're going to take you. So this
That's funny.
film this film did that. Did the producers
Yeah.
ever try to pull you up on that and tell you to tone things down?
Well, no, it was in the script, I mean, it was part of the story that as a mother dealing with her son who's gotten some sort of illness, as we learned in the story, and her struggle to, kind of make him better. And so it was all about the medical struggle of her son's survival. Um, and so putting like, pushing the envelope in terms of what you can get away with in terms of having kids be harmed or look like they're harmed in the story. But again, given the fact that he's turning into something sort of monstrous and bad, you can kind of get away with it more. Like, you think about movies like The Omen where they end up killing a kid at the end, or maybe they don't. They tried it, but I think you can get away with stuff. Evil, bad seeds are more open to being, off in a movie. But yeah, no, I think that was, but also, trying to find that connection between a mother and her son, and the emotional component of it was what drew me to that story. I just found it kind of moving, in that sort of heart-wrenching way of being a parent myself, what you would do, the lengths you would go to protect your child or make sure your child survived or was healthy. And, like you just do anything,
Yeah,
even if it's your own life or your own life in jeopardy, of course, you're right. You make those sacrifices. I mean,
yeah,
it's a movie about sacrifice, and sacrifice inherently means that someone has to suffer, whether it's you or someone else. And
yeah.
in this
I think
case,
what made it even more unsettling was the fact that his character remained sweet all the way through. You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
a lot of directors would have been tempted to just make him evil.
Well, we didn't, we wanted to kind of, it was sort of meant to tread that line between what is the supernatural world and a world of just like a medical anomaly, like something's happening to this kid, we don't know what. It could have a medical scientific explanation, or it could be something supernatural. He's possessed by a demon, or he's just got some weird rabid new COVID-19 type virus, and this is what's happening to him. So, we kept the explanation as to what's happening to the boy is kind of, there's what's in the tree in the
Mm.
story is sort of one of the big mysteries, and we kind of wanted to keep that, as I always like to do and appreciate in movies where they don't answer all the questions, right? They leave a little bit of mystery there. So we did in this, but so you could answer it in a number of ways. But I like the idea of thinking of it as I mean, obviously it's a movie. It deals with the vampire tropes, like the
Hmm.
story of a person who's being bitten and turning into a bloodthirsty creature. Like that's the essence of the story. But we also wanted to try to keep it real,
Hmm.
and grounded and feeling like it could happen. And this is, what would you do if you were the mother of this kid? Would you go to an exorcist, or would you go to figure out a way to keep him alive and find blood for him? That was
Yep.
sort of the story.
Yep. And I hope I'm pronouncing his name wrong. Finley Vontek Hisson.
Yeah, that's
Um,
about it.
he's phenomenal in this. How old was he when you shot, and did he comprehend the story as he was filming these grotesque scenes?
Oh yeah, yeah. They're all the kids, and like actor kids are very precocious. They're kind of he was a very mature young kid, and got it and knew what we were doing and was really into it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. He's a good kid. We it's like anything. Every time you do a movie with non-prof or kids who haven't had a lot of experience,
Mhm.
about, just sort of testing them, seeing if they got the chops for what you're trying to do, and also just have an inherent sort of quality to them, because a lot of what their performance is just them being themselves, not
Mhm.
trying to play a character. So yeah, he was quite good, hopefully it'll when we made it, he was I don't know how old he was, 9, or I think he was not 9, maybe 10. I can't remember. He was a young kid.
Yep.
Um, but they grow up fast, That's the thing. It's weird. I saw him recently, and he's like, "Oh my god, the kid's like 2 years or something, sprouted up." Um, but yeah, working with kids is fun. I mean, it can be kind of taxing. It can be challenging.
Mhm.
You got to really kind of be on your toes a little bit, think outside the box, because they do. That's how they operate.
Mhm.
And you can't just rely on all their instincts, because sometimes they're still learning their instincts. They still don't know exactly what they want to do, or they think they do, and maybe their choices are wrong. So you have to kind of go with the flow a little bit. But I enjoyed working with those two kids particularly. So it was a good experience overall.
Yeah, cool. And the film was, in some ways, it was quite contained. And nearly every filmmaker I've spoken to over the last couple of years have had their own stories about COVID productions. Was this your COVID film?
In fact, there was. We shot it. I think we were one of the first movies, thanks, that shot in the thick of the pandemic.
Mm.
We shot up in Winnipeg in Canada, where they didn't have a lot of cases, so we could, but
Yep.
everyone masked up and PPE, and the quarantines and all that. So yeah, we were, I think, one of the first or early features to get off the ground and complete without having to shut down. A lot of people went deep into their production and had to shut down because everyone got COVID or whatever back then. But we got through it, and it was I think back at it, it already seems like ages ago, that whole reality. Thankfully, yeah, it's that was my COVID movie, and then because COVID, it lasted a while. It's just ended in the television world. I mean, I've done a few TV things where it's like they're just now taking off the masks and allowing you.
Yep.
They were a little bit on the eight ball. So, but it's kind of, that's done. I don't know, in some weird way, like when you're doing a movie like that, having those restrictions in terms of being able to connect with people, sometimes it can help. Like you don't get as distracted. You just have to stay more focused.
Yep.
You don't just, yeah. So, but in the end, it would much prefer not to have to, talk to my actors wearing a face shield. It's pain in
Yeah,
the ass.
it's been a common story for sure.
Yeah.
Nearly everyone I've spoken to said the same. And that's the one thing about the interviews I've done over the last 12 to 24 months is the very similar stories.
Yeah. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've heard a lot of them.
So your body of work, like as I said before, it's been very influential to me. I've always put you in this camp of a very few select filmmakers that I consider to be like event filmmakers, because every time one of your films comes out, I get particularly excited about it. You got
Oh, that's great.
such a distinct cinematic voice. What attracts you to projects like, because they are in a way all very unique?
Yeah. Well, that's it. I think it's like, there's certain stories, themes or tones that interest me, genres. I like darker
Mm.
stories in the most broad stroke way of it, as opposed to, say, lighthearted comedies, which I've done early in my career, but I sort of took a more detour into the darker side early on in my career, just because that's kind of more in my line of thinking, or just more interesting cinematically, frankly. You think about great comedies and they're great, but you don't think about how they look as much as the jokes and so forth. So anyway, I like to sort of, I got my taste is sort of rather eclectic. I have different, I've done different types of movies, from dark thrillers to the horror, straight out horror, to
Mm-hmm.
political dramas, to period. Now I just finished. I'm actually in the process right now of finishing a mix for my new movie, Silent Hour, which is a kind of action thriller all set in a building,
Cool.
like, about cop thriller, really. So it's nothing horrific about it. It's just fun thriller stuff. So I like that too, but I think I always try to approach every project I do, regardless of what the genre is. I just try to make it as try to find a way take the genre, whether it's horror or a police thriller like we're doing now, and have a different way to a different angle on it, like whether how we shoot it or just even the story. The film I'm doing now is a cop thriller, but the lead hero can't hear, and he's trying to protect this woman who's deaf. So half of the movie is half of the movie they're communicating with American Sign Language, signing to each other. So it's like a unique way to sort of have to present the thriller genre without a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
uh, and so that was what attracted me to this particular project. What attracted me to Blood was, as I said, I just found, as a father and with two kids, like we really connected with that idea of like what you would do to protect your kids. With other movies I've done, it's more like the movie I did before Blood, Fractured, which is a Netflix film. Like, to me, that was just like a cool way to do something visually different. Like, how do you get inside a character's head? I think a lot of my movies are, a lot of the stories tend to be about singular characters, and you kind of get into their headspace and you sort of see the world the way they see it, whether it's Christian Bale's character in The Machinist or the character in Session 9, or, it's like you're kind of getting into their world a little bit, and and it can be scary in there, it can be kind of creepy, and maybe you don't even trust what they're seeing,
Mm-hmm.
like that kind of idea is interesting to me. I mean, the filmmakers that I adore, like growing up, were like the Kubricks and the Polanskis and Hitchcock, like, psychological thrillers, dark paranoid thrillers. Like, that's always been like the stuff that I enjoy, and I've done those. But again, I don't always like to do the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and part of that's just to try out new things, and also it's frankly also sometimes a function of just like what movie gets off the ground first, like or an opportunity. It's not always just like I can do whatever I want whenever I want.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes frankly, it's like this movie's ready to go. We got the money, let's do it.
Yep.
So there's that to consider. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just, every movie I approach in the way that I done it from the first movie I ever did, was just like, this is my thing, and I get really excited. I want to create something that's artful as well as entertaining and interesting and fun to watch.
The one thing I connected with your work the most was a few years ago. I don't mean this to be embarrassing for you, but I discovered your film Frankenstein's Planet of Monsters, right?
Really? Wow.
And I connected with that because that's the kind of shit that I was making when I was in film school, and yeah. So I think maybe that's you're already on my radar by then, obviously, because I went and looked for that. But I really connected with you. Yeah, it's a weird one. And I'm glad you mentioned Fracture too, because of all the films that you've done, that's the only one that's really caught me off guard, because I usually get press kits and things like that to know when a filmmaker's got a new thing coming, but Netflix don't really do that. And so I didn't know that one was coming. I just saw the thumbnail, clicked on it, and when your fucking name came up, I was like, yes, I had no idea. So, and it was a cool movie. Working with an Aussie, it was good stuff.
Yeah, no, it's fun doing. That was I hadn't done anything with a streamer before, but I mean, only in the sense that they're not really involved. I mean, maybe they are now. When I did it, they weren't. You can kind of make the movie you want to make. They give you a budget, go off and make your movie. Like, that's always what any filmmaker really wants. So that they gave us freedom to do what we wanted, which was cool. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, there's certain themes in the films I've done, but I think I always try to just not be pigeonholed, like to do the same thing again and again. It's just how I like to work.
Yeah, cool. If I take you back just for a moment to Session 9, that's just like one of the great psychological horror / thriller movies of all time. I fucking love it. And you mentioned that you'd done comedies. Was it a concerted effort? Like, I know you're saying that you're attracted to the dark side, but did you decide at that point in time that this is the direction you have to take?
Well, yeah, my first two movies were romantic comedies, and that's kind of how I got to start in this business. They premiered at Sundance. I sold one to Miramax, and it was like, successful to whatever extent. In my when I first was starting making films, it was like, oh, this is great. So it's sort of, that was what I was sort of I mean, only done 2 movies then, or 3 movies, but they were all romantic comedies, and that's kind of how I was sort of known. And so all the movies at Miramax, I sold I sold one of my movies to Miramax, and they gave me a 3-picture deal, whatever that means
Sure.
back then. So they were like, "We're going to give you other movies to do," and they were all romantic comedies of the same ilk of the movie I'd made, and I was just kind of like, really, it's not interesting to me.
Yeah.
I realized, like, I don't. I mean, occasionally I watch them, but making it was different because it's my movie. But just doing other romantic comedies wasn't. Point being that, like, yeah, you're right. I realized, like, this is not really the kinds of films that I want to be known for or do. And so with my friend Steve, I'd always loved horror from the beginning, and that hadn't ever changed, and psychological horror especially. So Session 9 evolved out of that. The concerted effort to break away from doing something like light and fun and romantic and funny, which is not how you would describe Session 9. So, like, so I made a concerted effort to sort of do something totally 180 degrees at what I'd done before, which I liked.
Yeah.
And then I can, just sort of fell into that. And then my movie after that was Machinist, and that was also sort of dark. So it was just kind of like, okay, well, these are the movies that are more, I like doing these movies more. It's more fun, more enjoyable.
They're the two. You pair those, and you realize that you're a bit of an auteur, because that's where, like, my excitement for what you were doing in the future always came from those two particular films.
Oh yeah.
Did Session 9, having pivoted from comedy to horror / thriller, did that open new opportunities for you, or was it The Machinist that sort of did that?
Well, different opportunities in different ways. Like my first movie, as I said, which I sold at Sundance, opened up a lot of opportunities for me because, Miramax put it out, and suddenly you're kind of on the radar, and I got an agent, and that sort of got me a foothold. And it was, it did well enough, whatever. I don't know, whatever. But, and I think, I think those movies, not maybe in the moment, but over the course of time, have become more, they've sort of gotten me. And when I do interviews about any other film, it's often that Session 9 and The Machinist get brought up, because those are earlier movies of mine, and people seem to have liked them for whatever reason. So, but yeah, I mean, they've given me particularly Session 9, which is a small movie made for no money. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, no money. And that movie's surprisingly become very has opened up a lot of doors in terms of, like, other kinds of projects, and producers who really like it want me to read a script that they've written, or that they want to do that kind of thing, or even actors who've seen it or who admire it. So yeah, it's kind of cool. So, but so I mean, it doesn't, there's nothing bad about that, like having a movie that that kind of helps open doors. But I have this tendency to kind of I think maybe Fractured was the one movie that was the closest to very Session 9 type movie. But I haven't done a movie like that in a while. I'd like to do another sort of dark, really kind of quintessential kind of horror movie in a way. So I've got a couple of those in my back pocket that I'm trying to get off the ground. And yeah, having done Session 9 shows that you could do that. So that doesn't hurt. But yeah, those films
do you have
helped me go.
Do you have a lot of people asking you, like, to explain parts of Session 9? Like, because we have conversations about it all the time on our show. It's something that I believe I've got it worked out. A lot of people that I talk to have different opinions, and I'm just going to lay down a little bit of a spoiler alert here in case I do blurt it out. But Peter Mullen's character, like, I had it in my head that he killed on day one.
Yeah.
Is that how it was in your head when you wrote it?
Yeah, it is kind of, well, the story was I wrote with my friend Steve, we wrote this script that was based on this awful murder in Boston when I was living in Boston for a time. and this guy worked as an insurance broker or something, came home one night from work and was just under the gun or whatever. His wife made him, these were the details from the actual story.
Yes.
His wife made him pasta dinner, and she was one thing led to another. They got into a fight, and he killed her and cut off her head and put it in the backyard on a stake.
What?
and then proceeded to go to work, put on a suit and tie, get showered in the morning, and go to work for the next 4 or 5 days, and have normal conversations with people and do work related stuff, and then come home and take a shower and go to bed and get up and do his normal routine like nothing had ever happened. Meanwhile, his wife's head was on a stake in the backyard. And like then someone, I can't remember how it ended, but he got caught. And to me the tagline in the story was like, how could this seemingly normal everyday guy crack like this guy did, but then completely like bury what he had done psychologically so he could go around in his everyday business. That idea was interesting to me. So yes, Session 9 was riffing off of that, and Gordon's character is kind of like the guy in the movie.
Yeah.
He kills his wife and his small child. And in the story, I don't think he kills him on day one. He kills him that night. When he comes home when he comes to work the next day, they're dead, if you want to look at that. And we don't know that, but like he does or doesn't because he's sublimated it or something. And like, so then it's just kind of like, he's now a monster and doesn't know it, and so part of that idea of someone who can push down something as horrific as that, and also can not acknowledge their own monstrous impulses until the end of the movie, maybe. To me, that's really cool. And of course, Peter Mullen, the actor, when he read it, he was like, it's a cool like character to play, man. It's crazy. Like, it's so much going on. But I mean, purposely in the movie, or even in some cases not purposely, but I guess you always say, oh yeah, I intended that. It's like there's a lot of questions in the story and about the session tapes and Gore, and then like the characters in the session tapes, that the sort of characters we hear in those weird tapes, and how that connects. And a lot of that was like, and why did Gordon do it? Was he possessed by Simon, this weird character that we hear in the tape? Is Simon like a kind of spirit that lives in that abandoned mental hospital? Was it a patient at the hospital inspired, like somehow possessed him? Or, I mean, keeping a lot of those sort of weird possibilities alive was good. And then that even the last line in the movie where you hear the Simon character say, the doctor asks him, like, where do you live, Simon? He goes, I live in the gut. I live in the gut. Like this, he can get in you, Simon, whatever Simon is. Simon is a metaphor for evil or monstrous. You can be possessed by him. Anyone can, and he can get into you, and like he can get in your gut and make you do awful fucking shit.
Yeah.
So like, it's a possession movie to a certain degree, but it's also a haunted house movie in a way. And it's also just an awful about a tragedy in a way. A crap movie. But I like the fact that it's a little, that you can interpret it in different ways, I suppose, like what happened, and keeping it ambiguous is always, in my mind, like, as long as it's not like ambiguous to the extent where it's just annoying or whatever, as long as it's intriguing, like, okay, well, maybe why did Gordon do it, and what does that shot mean at the end of the movie? Like, keeping all that stuff there is cool. Now, the question is like, how much of it is intentional versus just like when you make a movie, a lot of it, there's a lot of intention. Obviously, you're the director, you're trying doing 10 shots and performances with the music we use, whatever. All those are intentional choices. But at the same time, a lot of times, because a movie it's up for interpretation. Yeah. So, an audience will watch something and see something in your film that you never saw before, and they'll be like, oh, cool. Yeah. And you can either be like, I didn't intend that, but if you want to interpret that way, I'm happy to have you do it.
I do feel like I do feel like there were like hints in the truck, like things that were in his truck that he put there on day one that were in that flashback right at the end. I'm like, that shit wouldn't be there unless it was this particular moment.
Okay, you're right in that sense. Like we wanted to plant little Easter eggs, and again, subtle shit that you may not pick up unless you
Mm,
watch it a couple times or whatever. But yeah, like if you've killed someone and you don't want the audience to know about the murder till the end of the movie, but you want to hint at the possibility of it, then yeah, there's places you can like just the fact that he has a wound, like how did he get the wound? He
mm,
says he got it one way, but maybe not. And so building suspicions around him as a character, but also using the other characters as sort of red herrings, deflecting them a little bit,
mhm,
deflecting that suspicion was part of it. But it's a movie about dread, like and like the sense that some impending awfulness is just over the horizon, like
mhm.
that's kind of that tone that and to mention my other movie Fractured, which is similar in that sense. Like it's another story about a guy who's done something awful
Mhm.
yet can't recall it.
Yeah.
The he's buried the crime in a way, and then comes to the awful realization of what he's done, or maybe doesn't. In the end of the movie, like, is Gordon aware of what he's done, or is he going to live forever in his sort of like fantasy of he's an innocent man, or if ultimately
Mhm.
when he's charged with crime. So yeah, I like those movies. I think maybe, I mean, like I think about one of the first films I saw, one of my first, like Hitchcock's Psycho. It's the same idea. At the end of the movie, like here you've got like, a character who has completely become this monster, his mother, and like that was there was a bit of that in the movie,
Mhm.
in the sense of having a split personality, um, you know, and se- seeming to be one thing, but in reality or something else. That's
Yeah.
always creepy. The fact that anyone, a seemingly normal, sweet person, like Norman Bates, could be a monster. Like that's always a creepy premise.
For sure. Absolutely. Before I begin to wrap things up, I want to throw some fun questions at you. I used to own
Okay.
a video store and I used to love recommending your films to people. And I'm hoping that there are some people listening that if they don't know your work, they'll be very keen to go and dive into it. But I'm wondering
Oh,
if
cool.
if you had to recommend one of your films to somebody that's never heard of you, which one would it be? And you can't say Blood because every director always says the most recent
The
one.
last movie they did.
Yeah.
um, I did actually. It's not a movie, but it's a show I did. It's an episode of a show I did, which I really liked. It was a show that came out, and it's on video. I mean, it's on video. Or it's on
Mhm.
some. You can get probably streaming. I'm not sure, but it's called. It was an episode of a show called Masters of Horror, and it
Great
was
show.
like a series of directors that they hired, like Wes Craven and other people like myself who were not on that level, but
Mhm.
they hired like several directors, and they basically allowed you to go and make any dark horror movie you want as long as it was under an hour, and that there were no strings. It was really cool. It was a cool premise, and there were some good episodes or whatever, and then it was like an anthology, like
Yeah.
sort of like Mirror or something. And I did one called Sounds Like, which I really just thought was I just liked it because it was about a guy who has a super sense. He can hear things like he can hear the worms crawling in the grass 50 yards away, and he can hear the buzzing of a fly up there on the ceiling, and then he ends up and it's sort of like a murder story, but then he gets haunted by the guilt of having killed his wife. It's another wife who gets
Yeah.
killed.
I'm sensing the theme
But it's
here.
all, but anyhow, it's all sound. It's the whole movie is very much based on the use of sound, kind of like
Mhm.
Session. Not
Yeah.
a lot of sound employed in that movie to tell the story. Anyhow, I just mentioned that because it's something that maybe not a lot of people have seen, but it's called Sounds Like, and it was part of the Masters of Horror anthology, and it's not a feature, but I just really liked it. I was quite proud of what we pulled off on a low budget and under
Yeah.
an hour. It's a creepy kind of like, and there's great music in it, and it's really great sound design. I mean, in terms of features, I mean, I don't know. I'd be, I would say if you're interested in my work and want to see the versatility of a director who likes trying out different genres, go see one of my first films called Next Stop Wonderland, which was a romantic comedy, one that I sold to Miramax, with Hope Davis and a really great cast of characters. It was my first sort of independent film, and it's a sweet romantic comedy set in Boston, great soundtrack, totally different than a lot of my other work. But what I'm saying is, as a director, you're always trying to reinvent. I at least I am, is trying to sort of reinvent myself a little bit. So that might, the darker ones are out there and you can watch them and they're cool, but there's something, it might be interesting to see something on a lighter scale. And it's not like goofy, it's not like, like, it's not goofy romantic comedy. Like, it's more like it's a little bit more of a melancholy, like whimsical romantic comedy.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
And if I'm not mistaken, that was like one of the earlier shot on digital, wasn't it?
Not that one. No, the first one on digital, Session 9, actually. Yeah.
Oh, right. Cool. There we go.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did mention Masters of Horror, though. Mick Garris is a good friend of our shows, and the thing about that show was they treated every episode like a movie. Like they felt like actual movies.
Yeah. That's what was cool about it. You're essentially making an hour-long movie, and it wasn't like an episode of a show. It was
totally awesome show. What's the first movie you remember seeing as a kid that lit the fire? The bug of making movies.
Well, I think it was. It might have been seeing Lawrence of Arabia with my father.
Cool.
Nothing to do with but seeing that epicness and that scope on a movie, and like it's transported to this world that's completely foreign to you. And I mean, I remember seeing that movie, when I was a small child. And it was just like, wow, man, that's what cinema can do. That's one I specifically remember seeing. But I think the movies that I grew up in, my informative like film years were like the 70s and 80s, really. Late 70s, early 80s into, so a lot of the stuff that I was influenced by, like, Spielberg, of course, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and the big popcorn movies of the day, which you watched and you were like, wow, that's what movies are. And wouldn't it be cool to do that? Like, I wasn't watching like hip, cool European film.
Yeah.
But those movies were definitely influential. But yeah, for some reason, Lawrence of Arabia, which I still to this day think is like that's masterful filmmaking. No, it can't be any other way to put it.
Yeah, only just before we jumped online together, I was watching Christopher Nolan do one of those videos, going through a video store and picking out favorites, and Lawrence of Arabia was like just the one that stood out. Like it's a common thread.
He's got the precision of like directing the way David Lean did. I mean, he's like a master, So I can see that
for sure. Awesome. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here, but I thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, great.
And I'm excited to know you've got this new sort of action thriller movie coming out. So I'll be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, it'll be coming out. We're hopefully sometime in the fall or early next year.
Brilliant. Thank you, sir.
All right, great talking. I hope to get to Melbourne one of these days.
Hope so.
Don't say a word.
What is this?
Stop. Don't make this harder than it already is, okay? You deserve to know what's going on, all right? And I'm going to do my best to tell you. My mother would do anything to save your child. My son is very sick. Something got inside of him. Don't go any closer.
No! Get off me! Oh my God.
Is he gonna die?
I don't know what's wrong with him.
Owen? What are you doing?
His vitals are looking better.
Really is an amazing recovery. I want more.
No.
I need it.
How's your mom seem to you lately?
Good, I guess.
You guess.
What's happening to me? I feel different. Is it like a disease?
All I know is it's the only thing that's making him better.
I like it when it's warm.
Please, no!
We're
investigating a missing persons case.
Mom, he's getting worse.
I want more.
There's something wrong with that tree, Mom.
I want more.
He got inside Owen and it changed him.
I want more.
Mom, we have to help him.
I want more.